Here's a question that changes everything about Edgar Allan Poe's most famous story. When the killer hears a heart beating beneath the floorboards, whose heart is it? Because the old man's heart stopped. The narrator checked. He held his hand over the chest for minutes and felt nothing. The body was taken apart and hidden under the planks of the bedroom floor. And yet, with 3 police officers sitting right there, the murderer hears it. Low, dull, quick, getting louder and louder until he tears up the boards and screams out his confession. For almost 2 centuries, casual readers have taken this as a ghost story, a dead heart refusing to stay quiet. But read it closely, and Poe leaves a trail of clues pointing somewhere far more disturbing. The heart that betrays this killer may have been inside his own chest the entire time. Let's set the scene. Poe's narrator shares a house with an old man he claims to genuinely love. There's no greed, no grudge, no insult to avenge. He tells us so himself. The only problem is the old man's eye. Pale blue, clouded over with a film, like the eye of a vulture. Whenever it lands on him, his blood runs cold. So he decides, with what he calls perfect calm, that the old man has to die so the eye can die with him. And here's the strange part. The entire story is his legal defense. He isn't confessing because he feels remorse. He's arguing that he can't possibly be mad, because look how carefully he planned it, how cunningly he moved, how calmly he can recount every detail. Every single proof of sanity he offers us is, of course, another symptom. Before any murder happens, Poe hands us the skeleton key to the whole story, and most readers slide right past it. In the opening paragraph, the narrator brags that his disease didn't dull his senses. It sharpened them, especially his hearing. Then he says something no sane person says. I heard all things in the heaven and in the earth, and many things in hell. Stop and sit with that for a second. That is not a description of good hearing. That's a description of a mind that manufactures its own sounds. Hearing voices and noises that aren't there is one of the oldest markers of madness in all of literature, and Poe plants it in sentence 4. So when this same man later swears he can hear a heartbeat through floorboards and walls, we've already been told exactly how much to trust his ears, which is not at all. Now, the 8th night. He's been creeping into the old man's room at midnight for a week, easing a lantern open just a crack. On this night, his thumb slips on the metal clasp. The old man jolts awake, and for a full hour the 2 of them stay frozen in the pitch dark, each listening for the other. Then the narrator hears it, a low, dull, quick sound, such as a watch makes when enveloped in cotton. He insists it's the old man's heart. But think about the physics here. A human heartbeat is barely audible, even with an ear pressed directly against a chest. Hearing one across a dark bedroom is simply impossible. You know what isn't impossible? Feeling your own heart slam against your ribs after standing rigid in a doorway for 60 minutes, working up the nerve to kill someone. And listen to what that sound does to him. He says the beating increased my fury, as the beating of a drum stimulates the soldier into courage. That's a drum beat driving a body toward violence. And it's driving his body, whose heart speeds up in the moments before an attack. Not the sleeping victims, the predators. That is a textbook adrenaline surge, and Poe describes it with eerie accuracy long before anyone had the vocabulary for it. Then comes the detail that gives the whole game away. The beat grows so loud that the narrator panics the neighbors might hear it. Nobody on earth worries about neighbors overhearing another man's heartbeat, but a mind in total overdrive loses the border between inside and outside. The roar of your own blood starts to sound like it's filling the street. He isn't hearing the old man. He's hearing himself. Here's the detail I find most chilling of all. He drags the old man to the floor, pulls the heavy bed on top of him, and smiles. And then, the heart keeps going. He tells us it, beat on, with a muffled sound, for many long minutes while the man lay crushed beneath the mattress. Even setting ghosts aside, the medical reading is darker. A dying heart under a mattress doesn't audibly pound across a room for minutes. But a killer's pulse, spiking through the violence of the struggle, takes exactly that long to come back down. And notice precisely when the sound finally stops, the moment the deed is done and his panic drains away. Then he turns eerily calm enough to dismember the body in a tub and hide it under the floor without spilling one drop of blood. Calm body, quiet heart. At 4 a.m, 3 police officers knock. A neighbor reported a shriek in the night. And the narrator is magnificent. He beams, invites them in, explains the scream was his own from a bad dream. He gives them a tour of the whole house, brings in chairs, and in a flourish of pure arrogance, plants his own seat directly over the corpse. And for a while, it works. The officers relax, they chat, they're completely satisfied. Then he goes pale. He wishes they would leave. His head begins to ache. And here Poe does something remarkable. He lets us watch a hallucination being born in real time. First, it's a ringing in the ears. Then the ringing sharpens into a beat. Then the narrator declares, "I found that the noise was not within my ears." That's his own diagnosis. And it is precisely, fatally wrong. Now follow the volume knob. The sound grows louder as he grows more agitated. He talks faster to drown it out. It swells. He rages, swears, swings his chair around, and it swells again. Meanwhile, the officers hear absolutely nothing. They keep chatting pleasantly, sitting a few feet above a hidden body. If that beat were truly vibrating up through the floorboards, 3 trained investigators would notice it long before the host did. But no, the sound tracks one thing and one thing only, and it isn't anything in that room. It rises and falls in perfect lockstep with his emotions, because it is his emotions, his own pulse pounding in his own ears, amplified by a mind that told us on page 1 that it hears things from hell. Finally, he decides the officers must hear it too, that they're mocking him, and so he confesses. So why did Poe build the story this way? Because he was obsessed with the idea that we betray ourselves. Not long after this tale, he wrote about what he called the imp of the perverse, that inexplicable urge to do the one thing guaranteed to destroy us, including blurting out our own guilt for no reason at all. The telltale heart is that idea turned into a machine. The narrator kills to escape an eye that watches him, and he's destroyed by an ear that cannot stop listening to himself. That's the trap. Guilt, in Poe, isn't a ghost or a voice from heaven. It's a body. The mind can rationalize a murder in flawless lawyer speak. This entire story is that speech, but the body keeps score, and the body confesses. He never heard the dead man's heart. He heard his own, testifying against him. So, whose heartbeat? The old man's heart stopped under that bed, and dead hearts keep their silence. What the killer heard on the 8th night, what he heard rising through the floorboards, what he could not stop hearing in front of those 3 officers was the one sound no human being can ever escape. His own pulse turned prosecutor. And that's the real horror Poe leaves us holding. You can silence a witness, charm the police, bury the evidence so deep no one will ever find it. But guilt doesn't haunt you from the outside. It beats inside your own chest, 70 times a minute, growing louder the harder you try not to listen. The telltale heart was never under the floor. It was the one he carried into that room. The dead keep their secrets. It's the living heart that tells. Thank you for watching all the way to the end. If this gave you a new way to see the story, subscribe to Between the Chapters. A new literary deep dive lands every week, and I'd love to have you along for the next one.